And then another thing I remember from like during the Part 1 channel, maybe even kind of early into the Part 1 channel before I started, no, this was right when I started sharing the links around. Because as I always say, originally the videos were, I think, unlisted, but I was trying to break through from the gaslighting on the cognitive dissonance, so I would share the links of different things that were happening before I made them public, because the point of the videos was never to get seen. My original thought process was that if I had the D7's videos on YouTube, even if I lost the email or didn't have a phone or wasn't allowed to have a phone, I would still be able to show the quote-unquote help the videos from their phone. That was my original thought process for making the videos public. Definitely not for views, because that would just be embarrassing. But in the end, one thing I had to accept was that nobody cares, and so many people are in the same situations anyways, and it really doesn't even matter. You have to save yourself. But anywho, I remember this one guy was like, you are schizophrenic because you're wearing a messy afro. And comments like that helped me to understand more the real points of these terms. Not that I did know the history of psychiatry and what it was made for, and that I don't still research that stuff sometimes now, although not really recently. So I knew it was based off of like a lot of racial eugenics stuff, but comments like the whole, oh yeah, you are schizophrenic because you're wearing an afro, and even like, it even makes you think about what I like to call the Caucasian or white addict projection, and how in mostly white areas, especially ones with more money, they have had serious drug issues. But then again, even in the poor ones like Virginia, and they've made, the Caucasian community has made their drug issues the face of homelessness, as well as other things. And so, like, they like to do this thing where they like to accuse other people and melanated people of being on meth and heroin and fentanyl, or things that I noticed more so after becoming homeless. Because I noticed it before I became homeless, but after becoming homeless, it was very evident. I noticed things like whenever I'd be wearing an afro, I would have some white person accuse me of being on crack when I was in Cali, even though the whole 80s crack agenda was the FBI agenda anyways. But of course, they don't care about that, or they just say that's an excuse or whatever. But it's like, who in the world is even still doing crack? But yeah, it makes me think about that when I was in Cali and I'd be wearing an afro, somebody would say, you're too young to be on crack and stuff like that. And it's like, shoot, they just see an afro and they automatically think crack. But anyhow. Also other things with the Caucasian addict projection, and like how, especially if you're in these white areas like Cali and et cetera, and you're homeless, they automatically assume that you're on drugs because they are, their family is, or most of their people are, or they used to be. Like, they'll be like, I understand why you're in this situation. I know how hard it is because I went to rehab. In fact, I remember a little before I left Cali, I had an experience like this with the dude who, I met him while I was vending with this lady. Me and this lady were vending, and she was doing face painting. And there was a bar down the street that a lot of people were going to because it was a holiday, which is why she decided to vend near there in the downtown area. And this dude was extremely drunk, walking around peeing everywhere and everything in the parking lot. And I sat down by this building because I missed the bus. I missed the last route on accident while vending, and I had to wait till 5 a.m. for the bus to start running again. And what happened was he saw me, and then he came up to talk to me, and he did the whole, I went to rehab and I used to be on drugs and I get how it is. And he was like, I know what it's like to be looking for your next fix. And I really hate how white people do that. They do it in person and they do it online, where they try to do this whole, because I'm on meth, or because a lot of people in my community are on meth, you are too. And that's what the whole mental health projection thing, or the mental illness obsession of the West also makes you think about. Like, I even remember when I was in Cali, me and this one lady, who were the only two quote-unquote black people, would often have white people who were on substances, homeless or not, feel some type of way about us because we weren't on substances. And they'll be like, you're just pretending that you're not on heroin and methamphetamine to pretend that you're better than us, and stuff like that. it's all kind of similar. And I think it even goes into the whole thing I mention all the time, which is that in every situation, you're treated the same, but people just have a different excuse to treat you like crap. In fact, I remember like when things got more bad after the defects case, I had to start whispering in videos. Not that I didn't have to do that sometimes before, but when living with my mom, even before the Cash for Kids system stuff started, the second time I moved in with her at 12, I lived with her for the first time for a year, if even that, at 10, for 5th grade. And I wasn't allowed to have a phone then while living with her because she felt like I told my dad different stuff about like her boyfriend and more so about her not having food in the house. And she would feel mad because my grandma would come and bring me Nata de Cocos because she felt like it was because they felt like there was no food in her house, but it was because it was my favorite drink, not because of the other stuff. But anywho, I was never really allowed to have a phone, but after the thing with defect snitching about the 1,050 plus abuse evidence videos, things got really bad again. And so I had to start like whispering in the videos. And it would sometimes be hard to tell what I was really talking about. And one of the things about it is that I didn't have a lot of, I'm kind of choking. I didn't have a lot of time to like go back over the videos to really see how what sounded or how it looked, if I was even like aiming at what I was supposed to be aiming at. So they kind of looked however sometimes at that point in time. And I remember this one person asked me about me being on drugs and stuff, and it's like, but overall, one of the things about it though is that nobody's ever really going to care about you or what you have going on. People are always going to have something to say. And no, I forgot something. Another thing, during the part 1 channel, maybe the part 2, maybe even the part 3, somewhere from the part 1 to the part 3, this one white dude came in the comment section saying, you're just different from the rest of your kind and you see the issues here and you're different from the rest and different stuff like that. And he was saying that that's why I was being labeled off as a crazy one because I was different from other black people, and I saw the issues of the child abuse and the baby mama, baby daddy, wait a minute, baby mama, baby daddy drama and stuff and all that. And anywho, one thing I always say is that I don't believe that white people abuse their kids less. Oh my gosh, they're just more quiet about it, and they try to keep it a secret more, especially the ones that are southern ones. The southern ones are really loud and proud about child abuse and abuse in general and domestic violence between spouses. The other ones in like other places, they try to keep like them trafficking their kids and stuff a secret, even though it's really common in those types of areas, and nobody cares anyways, to be honest. And nobody's gonna save you, you have to save yourself. But either way, the dude was acting like we're saying that I just saw child abuse and all the family dysfunction as an issue, and that I was different from other black Americans, and that was why I was being told I was a crazy one and all that stuff. And some people in the comment section, the few people that there was there, they felt like mad about what he said, but honestly I get what he meant by it. But stuff like that also kind of went more into how like different people are always going to have their things that they're going to say about your situation, and most people aren't going to have anything good to say because they're abusers themselves, they've been abused themselves, and they have a cognitive dissonance, and most people see abuse as okay. Like with True Yasharella in America, most people never get away from their Jezebelic mob. They never accomplish anything in life because they're stuck under the control of their mom. And also Jezebel teaches you to be relying on her and to be codependent on her and to never learn how to take care of yourself. Even in the Matrix sense, you never learn how to work a job for yourself and get your own place or apartment. And you're always having to get boyfriends, girlfriends, stay with chomos, which you may not be able to get a place at a certain age anyways, but you could still camp or stay in your abusive family system because you can't see yourself making it without them. And the mental label thing also plays a part in that because, as I mentioned, one of the things about the mental label stuff and being told you're bad, crazy, slow, you're going to be broke forever, you're retarded, different things like that, you're handicapped, is that it's also told you to convince you that you'll never be able to do anything because you have quote-unquote issues. And that's also another reason why I'm always getting told, especially where I'm at now, the whole you're being bad and grown and you're either hiding from somebody or you did something to get kicked out. because you're a quote-unquote child and shouldn't be out here, because people are used to being stuck in their toxic family systems and being scared to leave and worshiping their mom, especially, or worshiping their abusive relatives in general. Another thing, what was the other thing? Okay, I remember now, finally. Other thing I was going to say is that, along with being homeless, now depending on where you're at, this could be worse. In places where they're used to street kids, a lot of the street kids are foster kids and victims of like serious high-level trafficking that have been through a lot of stuff, and sometimes they're like really, really fractured. And also they've been forced on substances and stuff. Not all of them though, but also just like with how, it's also racial stuff, as I mention all the time. Like often homeless hate can be used to like cover up racism, or just, I mean, it's obviously classism. So like how people see poor people or being poor as a mental illness in general, a lot of people see it that way. A lot of religious people feel that way as well, but even plenty of people that aren't religious, but especially like people who are consider themselves Christian and also Luciferians, both often consider being poor mental illness, which is very funny. But I often talk about how atheists and religious people have a lot of the same talking points, and a lot of the same ways about themselves. But anyway, to get back to the point though, being poor is seen as a mental illness. Being homeless is also seen as a mental illness, but also for homeless people automatically expect you in certain places more than others. They expect you to be mentally ill. Another thing is that if you're younger, people automatically assume that you've just been like out here getting R-worded every day, and so they expect you to like be risky and dangerous. Like, not really since I've been where I'm at now. Of course, you're always going to get treated like crap for being like the dumped out orphan that nobody cares about, at least in some people's eyes. But in some places more than others, people are going to act like they're more scared of you. Like I know in Cali, I have people run from me pretty often and be scared to come near me, and it causes even more risky stuff, especially with the racial side of people calling the police on me just for me like existing and walking down the sidewalk because they're quote unquote scared for me to be in their town and stuff like that, even if they don't know that I'm homeless. But like, as I mentioned in the song, whatever the rest of the title video, in some places people automatically assume that you're homeless if you're quote unquote black, because they know that you definitely can't afford to live there. They assume that, and that there's no way you're from there, and that you're either a homeless person from somewhere else, or a dumped out foster kid, or what else was it, or you're an immigrant. And since like my first day in Cali, I was always getting told to go back to Mexico. It was kind of funny though. They tell the Kenyans to go back to India, then they tell everybody else to go back to Mexico. But yeah, so I see mental illness the same way I see the white addict projection. It's a lot of stuff with obsessions that people have, trauma-based mind control, program racism, bias, sexism, and overall people just wanting to throw a label at you because they're telling them things that they don't want to hear, that makes them not be able to go to sleep at night. In fact, I remember that one video I had from maybe like 2018 from one of the millions of CPS cases, and there was this whole situation where the social worker came out, and of course she was really racist, and at that point in time I lived in the hood. And of course, as I always say, Jezebelic house niggers work with white supremacists to push you through systematic racism, and then they pull a black victim card. But anywho, that was the whole thing where my mom was like, I slapped her because she's autistic. That was honestly so funny. I remember I told a mandated reporter about that once in 2022, maybe 2023, at the little bit of school I did go to, kind of, which is kind of a long, confusing story. I told the school counselor about it, and the moment I told her, she literally laughed so hard she spit the water she was drinking out her mouth. Which, I'm not even gonna lie though, I get why it was funny, especially with maybe the way I said it, but like, people really do not give a crap. It is funny though, but like, people really don't give a crap. there was also this whole other situation I told her about that was pretty funny, and she burst out laughing again. But, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I do get why the whole I slapped her because she's autistic thing was funny, but like, it's still kind of, it's like they don't help, but of course they're cash for kids system staff, so, and in the end, as I always say, there is no system put in place to help you with any situation at any age. But anywho, and then the social worker, no, actually something else I could throw in. This may have, no, this was another situation that happened, I think, but it was similar. It also revolved around the bullcrap quote-unquote autism thing. But before I go to that, actually, because I forgot something, the social worker had gave my mom some pamphlets for autistic summer camps that we couldn't even afford if we wanted to. And then like stuff like that is often for certain types where I wouldn't even like really be able to blend in enough, I guess I could say. I don't want to be rude, but it's like, I mean, shoot, we couldn't afford that stuff anyways. I wouldn't be able to go to a summer camp if I don't even know what to say about it. It's just so funny she did that. Like we were, I don't know, it's just stupid. $100,000 plus summer camps for autistic kids. So I could quote unquote get out of my mom's hair. That was so funny. Kind of. But the next thing that this made me think about. So me and my dad would go to pawn shops pretty often, and there was this one point in time where I got this police badge thing that some dude would sell. Not sure how legal that was, but I liked wearing it as like, I don't know, just a joke. But of course, my mom pulled the whole autistic action white thing. And so what happened was that, no, this was the same situation actually, I think, because it was the same social worker. And then the social worker was like, oh yeah, I could understand how that could get her like into fights and make people bully her, because since she is autistic and she likes quote unquote white things and she wants to be a police officer, which is not true. I've never wanted to be a police officer. But the social worker was like, all the ghetto black kids, quote unquote, are gonna want to fight me. But yeah, I had to get off the bus. She was talking about I'm making all the ghetto, hoodlum, criminal black kids want to fight me. And that's another thing too that goes along with the whole quote-unquote acting white, autistic bullcrap, is that you're made to feel like you're different or better than the rest sometimes, but that can depend on what type of abusers you have. And I don't like that either. I didn't even like the gifted bullcrap and being made to feel like I was special because the school system is so bad that most people can't read. I didn't like that either. It also promotes a lot of pitting people against each other. But I'm trying to think about what else I could throw in that goes along with this. But I just don't know what else to say about it. The mental illness stuff is just overall bullcrap. And I know that like some people, if they don't have an abusive or toxic family system or guardian, or they're not in foster care or something. I don't even know what I was about to say. Oh yeah, I know what I was about to say, I remember now. They may feel like, well, ADHD isn't a mental illness, but to most people, yes it is. And especially if you're like the quote-unquote bad black boy or the bad boy with ADHD, and you have that form of ADHD. And that's another reason why I say these labels mean so many different things. Just like I said, the ADHD label for a 50-year-old white woman and the ADHD label for an abused and traumatized kid, or a boy who's smart or who's melanated with a single mom, or just parents who don't give a crap, or parents who aren't smart enough to know the school system is playing them by convincing them to force their kid on drugs. Like crap, I've even heard of this type of stuff happen to little white girls, and then the mom ends up regretting it because the mom didn't actually know that these cash for kids system staff, like teachers and the medical professionals, they get extra money for forcing your kids on drugs because, quote unquote, they get nervous while taking tests. Your whole life ruined over a piece of paper and a lot of stuff that's not even real. But at least for that girl, if her mom really didn't know that this was going to screw her up, then like she still has a supportive parent. Most people in these systems don't have that, but there definitely are people that are dragged in and their parents don't want them to be, but the parent doesn't have any power, which is really common with the juvenile justice and prison part of the cash for kids system and human cash cow systems. But yeah, and I don't know what else to say about it, but I know I'm forgetting something, but I definitely don't like that whole different than other black people narrative either. That's not something I like, although I can definitely say that I've never been the one that really necessarily fits stereotypes for my age, gender, ethnicity, or any of that, but that's also because I've always been interested in like researching the matrix and the different forms of trauma-based mind control and programming. But I do know that realistically, as far as most people could care, due to the things that I researched, the things that I know, my experience in life, the experiences of me and other people I know and have known, and the truths of the world that I see, as far as most people care, I am insane, and I am a sociopath, and I am schizophrenic, and I am a black, whatever else people would call me. I'm trying to think. What's other things that people say? Psychopath? But that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else more so. Oh yeah, as far as a lot of people care, I am a supposed criminal, which, I mean, especially with the homeless part, that's also considered being a criminal. What else could I say? Oh yeah, as far as a lot of people could care, I am a bum, and I am a lost cause and a castaway, and all the different word curses that I rebuke that people like to throw on me. But as far as a lot of people could care, I am those things regardless. And that's another thing that also goes along with the abuse situation. Like, I remember one time this lady who was being who had been SRA trafficked by her family because she was a Euro J3W Rev 29, and she was born in, but has had to spend the rest of her life running from her family. And I remember she told me not to discuss questionable or unpopular opinions or just different beliefs or ideas with people who I didn't know fully and weren't safe, or who I'm not close to. Or I would really say, don't discuss certain things with people who don't also know or believe those things. That's probably even a safer, better bet with that. But what was the other thing? Oh yeah, and it makes you think about like what I was just saying. Most of these things people hate to hear, because as I always say, realistically, human beings are our own worst enemy, and we secretly like all the dysfunction and chaos and mayhem and torture we've created on ourselves and others, because it all comes from one sin, not wanting to repent, disobeying God's laws, hating each other, hating ourselves, hating God, or hating God, hating ourselves, and hating others. What else is it? There's something else I could throw in there. For one person to be up, somebody else has to be down, as I always say. People want to have somebody to abuse and be over and rule over and lord over, things like that. So nobody really cares, and it's like, especially if you're in these situations, you can't have any unpopular opinions. And that's another thing about like fighting for like getting out of an abuse. If you want somebody to help you, but like, for example, a lot of the people that I met in support groups that really honestly did do a lot to help me, they had like a lot of covert subconscious racism and white savior complexes. Of course, the Rev 29 J3W serpent seed lady, because I mean, if you know anything about what that is or what that means, they have so much racial programming put into them because they're born being convinced that they're natives to Northeast Africa when they're literally Swedish people and Brits and stuff and Russians and Turks. So that really screws them up. So that was bound to go left. But anywho, like, they had all that program that they were under, and it eventually really started to cause a lot of issues with different things that they would do and say to me, and even things that I would do and say that they didn't like. And it's like, if you want people to help you in a certain situation, or like if you want to not be the quote-unquote crazy person, you have to believe and say and do and think what other people want you to think. And that can also cause a lot of extra issues. And then eventually, once you have to confront the person about something that they did that was mean to you, or even if you just want them to stop talking to you, they'll be like, oh, well then I guess maybe you really are retarded because blah, 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 stuff like that. And that's why, like, realistically, it was almost pointless to even make the abuse evidence videos, but, okay, I'm out of breath, but, it's definitely something to look back on and, like, remember where I came from and how hard I fought to get where I am now and to get out and all that. But it's like, especially when doing the abuse evidence videos, I would often feel like really nervous to talk too in depth into anything because I had to not be the quote unquote crazy person, even though nobody gave a crap. Nobody believed my mom. The only people that would sometimes do stuff for her was because they got paid to do it. And nobody gives a crap, and I was gonna have to save myself regardless. And just like that dude said, if I were you, I would focus more on getting out than proving I'm sane. And then another thing to go along with that, which I have the screenshot somewhere. I did use it for a video, but I cleared and gave away that old phone a couple of days ago. And I don't even know what video it was, but pretty much, I remember this one guy told me that with all that you've been through, you're practically normal. Which I don't believe that. I don't like the normal term. I've always been reminded that I'm not normal. But I will say that, like, maybe in some ways I could get what he means. Because, like, as I mentioned in the part 1 and showed those screenshots from that lady who made that video, pedos love quote-unquote bad kids. But she goes in what I always say with the whole bad, crazy, slow, and retarded stuff. And how all the different mental labels fall under those categories. And they all mean those things, and that's what people are trying to tell you are. And they tell you that's why you deserve your abuse, and that's why I'm not going to help you, and different stuff like that. But anyway, hold up. I think I was going into the whole thing where, like, even back when I was in the Cash for Kids, before I even went into the Cash for Kids system, before I moved with my mom at 12 and started going through that, I always could tell when other people are being abused and traumatized and stuff like that. Which, I mean, most people, they do go through abuse. And, as much as people want to, like, I don't know how else to put it. It's always very obvious, especially when it comes to the quote-unquote black community or the Judah tribe Bantus in America, especially, that, like, everybody's going through so much abuse and trauma. And it's not even that the white kids aren't going through it, but it did often feel like, especially in elementary, that more white people weren't than, I don't know how to put it, like, kind of like a ratio. Like, thinking about a quote-unquote black to quote-unquote white ratio of who's getting abused and who's not. And it seemed like those of True Yasharel definitely were more, and often had a lot more family issues. In fact, no. I remember I mentioned in this one video I made, I don't even know if I still have it. It might have been on the evidence channels, but I used it as an example. There was a video of a little girl who's quote-unquote black. She was in, like, 1st grade. People were saying she needed to be put in a military school. Now, nobody's saying that stuff, but racist white people in the house niggers that love child abuse that agree with that bullcrap and don't even know what a military school is, can't even afford a military school at that. And it's just human trafficking anyways. But to get back to the point, though, in the comments section, there was this one dude who left a comment. He was like, the usual black kid, unconventional, crappy home life, and no impulse control. And this is something that I've mentioned a lot throughout the years. White people often point out the abuse and our communities. And yeah, I did have a video about this actually. Definitely on the evidence channels, but I feel like it was here too, but maybe not. But I'll talk about this pretty often, how like melanated people are loud and proud about abuse. White people try to keep their abuse a secret. And that's why like they're able to pretend that they don't abuse their kids. And then make fun of melanated people who literally make jokes about all the child abuse that they do and have went through. And whooping newborns and stuff like that. But to get back to the point though, that comment even makes me think about that comment that dude left on my video about how it's different from the rest of my community and the other stuff he said along with that. But that's not even the point though. The point is, before I ever went through the mental health, there are more mental health leaning bullcrap and the other branches of the Cash for Kids system, and before I moved in with my mom, I noticed that the abused kids were always the class clowns and the quote-unquote bad kids, because I could always tell who was being abused and who wasn't. And honestly, a lot of the quote-unquote class clowns and bad kids came to school with bruises all over them anyways. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. And often, like me, they live with their grandma or their grandparent, but typically the grandma. And a lot of them were boys. And it's really unfortunate because the school system is there to push you into prison. That's why they literally based school to prison pipeline based off of they build prisons based off of third grade quote unquote black boys reading levels. And they're like, if he can't read by the third grade, we got to go ahead and build another prison. And of course, as I used to mention on some other channel, don't remember which one. It wasn't even one of the evidence channels, I don't think. But the record labels have private contracts with the private prisons, or the prisons in general. Which is kind of another topic, but I mentioned the whole down low feminine thug persona and traumatized boys and even girls having to like look up to different industry people that are industry plants and are also traumatized themselves. But anywho, this is getting really, really long. But next thing, point is, I never was the fighter, the arguer, the cursor, the cursor. I'm still not, but it sounds kind of funny. But I never did any of those things, but still, just due to the abusive relatives I had, I was pushed through the Cash for Kids system. It kind of reminds me of this one comment that this one dude left who was very racist in a support group, which the racism is a side thing, but that's Reddit for you. And he was talking about how he got put in a Jim Crow, well not Jim Crow because that's racial, but he got put in a self-confined sped type placement. And he was put in there because of his abusive parents, and he talked about he was never even bad, he just has CPTSD. But I mean, everybody in there has CPTSD. Shoot, a lot of the staff probably even have CPTSD. I know when I was in the Jim Crow self-confined, the staff had CPTSD, and they also were Jezebels, or now called quote-unquote narcs, which is a bullcrap term. But they were always talking about abusing their kids, their parents abusing them, their parents abusing their kids, and all types of stuff. Like, I remember this one time the self-confined staff went on a rant, and the dude was like, yeah, I had to beg my dad not to kill my son. Then another one of the staff members was like, yeah, I had to beg my parent not to kill my kid too, because my parent said that my kid was disrespectful. And that's another video, which I still have plenty of videos about that on, I think, the Prt4 channel, but they're unlisted. But anywho, it also makes me think about something else someone said, where they were like, I was never even bad, I was just autistic. And while I don't agree with the label bullcrap, one thing that I also realized that I could throw into the whole bad, crazy, slow thing is weird. I did notice that when I was being punished for something, I was being punished for being quote-unquote weird. And I could throw that in there too, so I'm going to start saying weird, bad, crazy, slow, retarded. But anywho, I think that may be it. And that's why I don't like the mental label bullcrap. There are more reasons why. It's very controlling, and you have to pretty much bow down to what other people want you to believe. And as I mention all the time, That's why a lot of people who are victims of Ramco and trap systems don't want to admit that they are, not only because admitting it to themselves will probably cause them to split and fracture because it's too much to accept, just like how when people are splitting with fractures from trauma, they'll sometimes be like if they're talking about, I don't know, their mom sexually abusing them or something, they'll be like, my mom did this, but then another person or personality would come out of them and be like, no, my mom couldn't have did that. Like the boy who's being trafficked by the U.S. military and other organizations, which I had that video, and if I remember, I'll put it in the description, but it's in the Bad Crazy Slow playlist. But anywho, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and then like it's also considered quote unquote conspiracy theory stuff, because that's what people say when you say things that they don't want to hear, or they'll just say schizophrenic conspiracy theory. So people are scared to see their abuse situation for what it is because, oh, if I see my abuse situation for what it is, then I'm going to be seen as a crazy person. Or even if people start to understand the spiritual side, or even want to believe in God, or even if it's just their culture to believe in God, they'll be scared to talk about that, or go into that or learn about that, because then they're going to be the quote-unquote crazy person. And that's why I also mentioned the LT Corbis thing. Because one of the things about the LT Corbis situation is that, sure, LT Corbis was labeled off as racist and a conservative, even though really she wasn't necessarily conservative, because she knows that the left and the right are both false and on the same bird, but she still never got labeled off as schizo. But if a quote-unquote black kid was talking about the same things that she's talking about, or was talking about, which are the same topics I've also always liked, then they'd be labeled off as schizophrenic, or maybe even autistic. And although she did say that she did have high-function autism, I can't remember if she ever said she was formally diagnosed or not, but she never really identified with like most other people that have the label. But it's really funny how that goes, which actually reminds me of my video, Perspective of Insanity, where I mentioned something like that, and I made that video like over a year ago, and the thumbnail's like a nose with a bead stuck in it, because the title either is or was going to be, are you sticking beads up your nose and expecting different results, but I might have put that in the thumbnail. Can't really remember what it was about, but I do know I mentioned something similar to the thing I just mentioned with LT Corbis in that example. But yeah, like I never did the bad fight, well, quote unquote bad fight and cursing, all that stuff, and of course there's still going to be an issue, because no matter what you do or don't do, you're going to be in trouble anyways. Like I even had nightmares for years, even though I was never locked up that many times, just one or two, of being told I had to work my way out. And realistically, you can't work your way out and improve your way out. You had nothing to improve on. These systems are there to make money off of you and further abuse and traumatize you and make you a statistic. In the school system branch of the Cash for Kids system is your first branch. Now, I'm not talking about Jim Crow placements. I'm not talking about GATE, SPED, alternative schools, boarding schools, military schools. I'm not even talking about any of the side branches. Just the school system itself, the regular school, that's your first branch that most people go to, and that typically most of everybody has to go through in the U.S. And whether you have an abusive family system or not decides how that's going to go for you. And if you're going to make it out of that, or you're going to end up in prison after that, or during that, really, or because of that, or behind that. Like, if your abusive relatives don't want to throw you in some prison, the school system will do it, as I kind of already mentioned. Now, I definitely mentioned that in the part 1, with the 8-year-old Bentley kid whose parents set him on fire, and the Mexican boy who kept saying no habla inglés. The school system got both of them locked up. And one of the unfortunate things about it is that the 8-year-old boy, with his medical records, if the school is told about that, he already has bullcrap mental labels on him that he doesn't have and isn't old enough to have. So the school system will already see him as an issue. And if his abusers or whoever haven't told the school, oh, he supposedly has this, and that problem, they still probably know his parents set him on fire. So they're going to see him as a risk and a traumatized person anyways. In fact, I seen this video of this boy talking about he got sexually abused by some dude. It might have been his dad, but I can't remember. He told the school about it, and they told him it was a personal issue. Even makes me think about that one situation I used to show often with that lady who told her school, the police laughed at her, the school laughed at her, and the principal slammed their door in her face and stuff like that. But people just don't care, really. And I know a lot of people are never going to want to accept this, and people are going to say, I'm just depressed, and I've never had anybody help me, and all that bullcrap that people say. But it's like, if you admit that nobody's going to help you with anything, then you're just depressed and you have a bad view on people, and you have trust issues, quote unquote, and maybe nobody's ever helped you before, quote unquote. But if you run around asking people for help, they're going to say, that's none of my business, you're beautiful, keep smiling. What else do people say? Be an adult and figure it out, you're grown anyways. I'll only help you if you'll let me essay you. What else do people say? You're just crazy. Or they'll go back and tell your abusers. What else? Just different things like that. If you ask for help, people get mad at you, or they just straight up disappear. They start working with your abusers against you. If you admit that nobody will help you, people see that as a problem as well. People want you to have a lot of false hope. People want you to have this false hope that they give a crap about you when they admit that they don't.
When you start playing your true feelings and your true colors, people push you aside. But when you play that fake facade and put on a fake smile every day, they be like, hey, but as soon as you start showing your real face, people push you aside. People only want what they can use. People only want what they could bring to the table. If you can't bring shit to the table, people don't want your ass. Start learning how to not give a fuck if a person wants you or not. And you might be somewhere, literally. Might have a nick.